My husband, aged 34, and I, a 26-year-old woman, first crossed paths while I was in the process of turning my life around. He worked a physically demanding job in construction, and I had dropped out of high school years earlier, but had decided to return to school to earn my credentials. Our chance encounter occurred as I was leaving night school, and he was waiting for his cousin. His cousin was taking quite a while, so he approached me seeking assistance in locating him, and this led to a conversation. Concerned for my safety due to the late hour, he kindly offered to drive me home, which I appreciated and accepted. This act of kindness became a recurring gesture, allowing us to get to know each other better, eventually leading to a romantic relationship. Throughout my educational journey, he remained a constant source of support and encouragement. In fact, he went above and beyond by assisting me in gaining admission to college and covering my tuition fees. After my college graduation, we tied the knot, and I secured an internship. Over time, I climbed the corporate ladder, eventually reaching the position of executive personal assistant. In this role, I worked closely with one of the company's top executives. While my husband was genuinely happy for my success, the physical distance caused by our careers was challenging. Despite the challenges, we were committed to making our relationship work. However, my boss's behavior during our business trips complicated matters. Initially, it started as innocent flirtation when we were alone, but it soon progressed to more direct advances. He openly expressed his desires and intentions, catching me off guard. I must admit I enjoyed the attention, but his forthrightness both surprised and frightened me. Our interactions expanded beyond business trips, with him taking me on romantic getaways, showering me with extravagant gifts, and occasionally depositing money into my account. We both understood the boundaries of our respective committed relationships and regarded our affair as a way to explore fantasies discreetly. To maintain our secret, we made concerted efforts to keep our involvement hidden. Recently, my boss arranged a trip to Mauritius to celebrate the success of a major project we had worked on. The project positioned him for a promotion, which in turn held the promise of a promotion for me as well. I deceived my husband by fabricating a business trip, claiming that it held the potential for a promotion. He expressed happiness for me, but was also saddened by my departure. The trip itself was enjoyable, with fantastic scenery and a lot of fun, briefly diverting my attention from the problems at home. At one point, I called my husband and came up with an excuse to extend the trip. Upon my return, I was met with packed bags placed by the door, atop which lay divorce papers. To my shock, I discovered that I couldn't unlock the door. The locks had been changed. My attempts to reach my husband by phone were unsuccessful. I waited anxiously at the front door for hours, hoping for an explanation. Growing increasingly impatient and upset, I eventually called a friend who came to pick me up, offering to let me stay at her place for the night while I figured out the situation. I confided in her about the bewildering turn of events, prompting her to call my husband, his friends, and even his workplace in a fit of anger. That night, he showed up at my friend's house, and a heated argument ensued, primarily centered on her actions involving his workplace and how he was treating me. Once the argument had subsided, I gathered the courage to ask him why he was subjecting me to this ordeal. Without uttering a word, he opened his phone and displayed incriminating pictures and videos of my boss and me behaving intimately at the beach and in the hotel lobby. I remained in a state of shock and disbelief when he demanded to know the duration of the affair. Attempting to offer an excuse, I faltered, but he repeated the question with an unsettling intensity that was entirely foreign to our interactions. Overwhelmed with emotion and on the brink of tears, I finally admitted that the affair had been ongoing for 4 months. This confession ignited his anger, and he appeared on the verge of tears himself as he admonished me. He questioned how I could betray his trust and jeopardize our family's future in such a manner, shattering my heart. Overcome with guilt, I found myself on my knees, pleading for forgiveness. He informed me of his desire for a divorce and then left. I genuinely love my husband, and I'm committed to making our relationship work. I can't envision a future with anyone else but him. What I did was purely for excitement and the prospect of a promotion. How can I rebuild his trust? What can I do to persuade him not to go through with the divorce? We've been through so much together. Ending it like this is hard to accept. My boss is a married man, and he was aware of my marital status as well. It wasn't a case of workplace harassment because I welcomed the attention from him, and I found our relationship exhilarating. There was no emotional connection in our affair. My husband is the only man I love and will ever love. I got caught up in the thrill of it all. The photos and videos of my boss and me were sent to my husband by a mutual friend who happened to be honeymooning in Mauritius at the same time we were there. I had no prior knowledge that they would also be in Mauritius. I hope that clarifies things. My husband was dead serious about proceeding with the divorce. He showed no inclination to work things out, even when I proposed seeking the help of a marriage counselor. I couldn't comprehend how he could be so quick to give up on our life together and disregard my love for him, just like that. It wasn't until my friend provided a new perspective that I started to understand. She made me realize that he had wanted to leave our marriage all along, and I inadvertently gave him the excuse he needed. She encouraged me to fight with everything I have and make him understand the pain he's caused me, and I'm fully committed to doing just that. Update. Darn it, I've been let go from my job. My boss explained that my messy divorce situation might implicate him, especially since he's in line for a promotion. It was kept hush-hush, and my boss provided some compensation before parting ways. Currently, I'm in the job hunt while also battling for alimony. It's been a while since my last update, but I managed to secure my share of the house and alimony from the divorce. So, financially, I'm doing all right. My ex put up quite a fight to keep the house, but the court ruled fairly. I recently found a new job, although it's not as good as my previous one, and the benefits aren't great either. Coupled with the fact that my alimony will run out in less than a year, it feels like I'm living on a tight budget. Looking back, I don't believe my approach was entirely wrong, considering I was the one who betrayed our marriage. Admittedly, I was vengeful and spiteful, but marriage is a legal commitment, and my ex had obligations towards me as well. Nevertheless, I wish I had handled things differently. Perhaps we could have resolved our issues, and my life wouldn't be as messy and lonely as it is now. There was a time when we were a lovely, wonderful couple, deeply in love, unable to be apart. A few years ago, my husband expressed a strong desire to start a family. I wasn't ready, but the pressure got to me, and against my better judgment, I agreed. So, last August, we welcomed our first child into the world. She's an adorable, funny little girl, and we both adore her more than anything. We decided I would take a year off work to be with our daughter. However, a few months into it, I began to resent this decision. I missed my freedom, disliked being a stay-at-home mom, and felt generally unhappy. One night, I went out for drinks, only the second time in about 7 months, and I started getting attention from guys. They were buying me drinks and flirting. I happened to forget my wedding rings at home, but I didn't bother mentioning that I was married. I arrived home intoxicated, and our argument from earlier in the evening continued. I couldn't recall the specifics, and eventually we both went to sleep. The following day, I became aware that I was dangerously close to betraying my husband, if not physically, certainly emotionally. I confessed to him, but all he wanted to discuss was our previous day's disagreement, completely ignoring the fact that I had come home drunk. I practically shouted it at him, exclaiming, "Hello! I'm expressing my desire to be unfaithful to you." And at last, he comprehended. Approximately a month passed with no significant changes, and I concluded that I required some time off. I embarked on a month-long vacation with our daughter, traveling across the ocean to my hometown. This trip marked the first occasion for our family to meet her, and I thought a month would be a substantial amount of time. However, things took a scandalous turn when I spotted my ex walking down the street. He resides nearby, just down the street from my grandma's house. He's the only man, besides my husband, whom I've ever genuinely loved. But perhaps the nostalgia of a youthful summer romance at the age of 16 paints everything in a favorable light. Returning to the story, we arranged to meet, and at this moment, I'm truly in search of a friend, and he's willing and available. There we sit on his couch, tears streaming down my face because my life feels like a complete mess. He comforts me and we share a kiss. It escalates into a passionate makeout session. It feels inappropriate. Immediately, I yearn for my husband, wishing he were the one holding me, embracing me. However, he's 1,000 miles away, and I wasn't feeling loved at home anyway. The next day, I confessed to him. I'm still uncertain about our marriage, but I knew I didn't want to be with that other guy. My sole intention was to show my husband that he could lose me. He's clearly upset. He mentions that he can't even bear to look at me on Skype. He's filled with anger and sends me a meme that reads, "If you love somebody, you don't mess around with someone else." This is where I make a terrible decision. I return to the other guy's house. I suppose I just craved some affection. This time, we actually engage in sexual activity. Twice. Around this period, my husband warns me that if I see that man again, our relationship is over. So I keep it a secret. 2 to 3 weeks later, I return home, and my husband is genuinely making an effort. Everything seems perfect, and there's a sense that we can repair our relationship. He asks me, "Did you do anything else with him?" Initially, I lie about it, but then I decide to come clean and tell the truth. He feels betrayed all over again. I'm deeply sorry, and I truly regret everything. He expresses a desire to work things out, and I'm doing my best to give it my all. But I feel like he's using me as a verbal punching bag. I understand that just being present and not leaving is his way of trying. I only revealed the truth to him the day before yesterday, so I recognize that he needs more time. I guess the question now is, what should I do next?
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
I recently went through a tough life situation, and instead of feeling relieved, I'm now feeling really sad and down. It's about my relationship with my ex-girlfriend, whom I'll call Benita, and me, Luis. About 2.5 years ago, Benita and I started dating. We first met when she was cutting my hair. She's a successful cosmetologist with her own chair and sink in one of those beauty shop complexes where independent cosmetologists rent space. She's 26 years old. As for me, I'm the operations manager and head designer at a landscaping company. I've been with the company since I was 16, and now, at 27, I still love my job and my boss. The company faced some tough times, losing customers and employees. When I was 19, the company owner asked me to step into the crew manager role. I quickly built up our team and started bringing in new clients, earning finder's fees along the way. Today, our company is 4 times bigger than when I took over. I've done so well that the owner gave me 25% equity and operational ownership in the business, which means I share in profits and have the option to buy the business if it's ever sold. He believes that without me, the company would have gone under in just a year. Benita and I really clicked because she was also a small business owner, a hard worker, and level-headed. She was a saver and quite thrifty, which was different from the girls I had dated before. Even though she was very attractive, she had a curvier body type, not fat but solid. I didn't have any issues with that. It was just a departure from my usual dating preferences. Nonetheless, we grew very fond of each other quickly. I told Benita up front that I wasn't looking for anything serious at the moment because my main focus was on growing my business. I also explained that I had lost faith in marriage due to the high divorce rates and the way men are treated in court. However, I did express my desire to find a nice woman to build a life and family with. Benita mentioned that her views on life were quite similar to mine, but she still believed in marriage when it was the right match, as it was something our community and our religion valued. We are both Hispanic Americans and share the same Catholic faith, attending the same parish. Benita's family hails from the eastern Mexican state of Veracruz, while my family comes from Sonora in western Mexico. Her grandparents immigrated to the U.S., while my parents were born here. Our families had some social interactions, exchanging pleasantries at church events and community festivals, but we weren't close friends or had any other connections before our relationship. At the start, we only saw each other once a week, but that quickly increased to 2 days a week. In the final 5 months of our relationship, we were spending 5 nights together each week before the incident that changed things. Both of us felt it was important to have some time apart to focus on our businesses, maintain our friendships, and sustain the spark between us. If I had to sum up our relationship in one word, it would be happy. We connected on a mental and physical level and had very similar personalities. We simply enjoyed each other's company. Benita shared a 2-bedroom apartment with Katrina, who also worked as a cosmetologist at the same salon. I had reservations about Benita living with Katrina because Katrina enjoyed partying and going to bars, nightclubs, and after-hours places. In contrast, Benita was either a social drinker or didn't drink at all and didn't frequent bars or clubs. Katrina had cut my hair once before I got to know Benita, and she had shown interest in me. However, she wasn't the type of woman I was interested in because I'm not into people who drink heavily or frequent clubs. I was concerned that her habits might influence Benita, but fortunately, they never did. Over time, their friendship began to deteriorate, and they no longer enjoyed living together. So, Katrina moved out 6 months ago and relocated her business to a different salon. To be honest, I was relieved, and Benita was fine with handling the rent and appreciated having the apartment to herself. I reside in a converted commercial building situated at the back of my parents' property. When my dad bought our first house, he wanted to acquire as much land as possible for planting vegetables and fruit trees. Homes in our neighborhood were quite affordable back then, and you could even find some for under $40,000. My dad purchased our house and the 4 empty lots, 2 on each side, where homes had been demolished for less than $50,000. Consequently, we have an extensive property, and our backyard is incredibly spacious. The property behind our house, on the adjacent street, used to belong to a utility company that no longer utilized it. The property featured an old brick building constructed exceptionally solidly by the WPA nearly 100 years ago, designed to handle heavy loads. When the utility company vacated the land and building, my dad acquired it at a low cost. He then handed the building and land over to me, and I transformed it into an open floor plan with a loft and an internal garage. It's the most impressive building in our city neighborhood. Additionally, the landscaping across our entire property is exceptional, which aligns perfectly with my passion. Our neighborhood has undergone significant gentrification, and as a result, our homes are now worth many, many times what my dad initially paid for them. I apologize for the lengthy explanation, but I'm incredibly proud of my parents' achievements. In September of last year, my dad, brother, and one of my cousins traveled to the Hermosillo area to visit my grandparents, help with some house repairs, and spend time with our extended family on my dad's side, all of whom live there. We had been planning this trip for over a year, and each of us had arranged time off from work. While I was excited about the trip, I was worried about being away from Benita for such an extended period. So we decided to stay connected by talking, texting, and using FaceTime every day to alleviate our loneliness. The trip turned out to be fantastic, and time passed quickly. When I returned, Benita and I resumed our relationship from where we had left off. Our bond continued to grow, and our relationship became very strong, to the point where I started reconsidering my views on marriage. Several weeks after returning from the trip, I noticed that Benita appeared to have a fuller figure than usual, and her face had a flushed look. I didn't mind these changes. In fact, I found her even more attractive. However, when we were physically together, she would become unusually warm or even overheated, something she had never experienced before. She also became more proactive in seeking physical intimacy and spending time together. A couple of weeks later, Benita approached me and informed me that she had taken 2 tests that confirmed she was pregnant with my child. I was surprised because I had always used rubber and was very careful in their use and disposal, ensuring that we had no skin-to-skin contact unless I was wearing one. She carried a manila folder containing several printed articles, which presented studies indicating that protection were not entirely reliable, with failure rates ranging from 2% to as high as 7-8% in some of the articles. I believe she did this because she anticipated my skepticism. I felt joy about becoming a father and being Benita's life partner, but I wanted this to happen at the right time. This wasn't part of my initial plan, but sometimes life doesn't unfold as expected. We spent the remainder of the night discussing it, and the following day, I informed my parents. My mom was disappointed to learn that we had been using protection and engaging in premarital intimacy, but she was thrilled about becoming a grandmother. She suggested that I should consider marriage to make things right. My dad was understanding and asked if I was happy with the news, to which I replied yes, even though it wasn't planned. Afterward, I accompanied Benita to inform her parents, and their reactions mirrored those of my own parents. They too started questioning us about marriage. Benita then shared the news with her extensive network of 5,000 plus friends and followers on Facebook, receiving over 2,000 likes, loves, and supportive messages. She had connections with most of the people in our parish, our community, and individuals she had met at her beauty shop. Our relationship was thriving, and we grew even closer as we prepared for the arrival of our child. Although we continued to live separately, we were making plans to have Benita move into my home before the birth, and we intended to cover the remaining 3 months of her lease. Then, unexpectedly, Katrina showed up at my workplace and asked if she could talk to me because she had a message to deliver. She expressed her belief that Benita may have been unfaithful to me while I was in Hermosillo, and that her baby might not be mine. Given the strained relationship between Katrina and Benita, I initially didn't take her words too seriously. According to Katrina, 2 brothers, whom we'll call Chris and Nick, visited the salon late one afternoon for haircuts. They were from Greece and had been in the country for 3 weeks, helping their uncle and aunt with their recently opened Greek restaurant. It was a Friday, and they were scheduled to return to Greece on Monday, so they wanted to get haircuts before leaving. Katrina mentioned that, since it was getting late, the brothers kindly invited both Benita and me to dine at their uncle's restaurant for free. We accepted the offer, as it was dinner time, we hadn't had lunch, and we were famished. Katrina explained that they drove separately to the restaurant, and upon arrival the entire family gave us a warm welcome, insisting that we order whatever we liked as their treat. She spoke highly of the family, praised the restaurant's appearance, and described the food as delicious. After the meal, we all gathered in a bar area where Chris and I began discussing the waterfront, something he wanted to see before leaving. I offered to take him there. I asked Benita and other family members if they wanted to join us, but the family mentioned they were occupied with restaurant duties, and Benita said she wanted to continue chatting with the family and then head home. According to Katrina, she and Chris were away for approximately an hour and 15 minutes. She dropped him off around 9 p.m. when the restaurant was closing. The parking lot was empty, and Benita's car was not there, so she didn't think much of it. The following morning, at the beauty shop, she and Benita briefly talked about how good the food was and how pleasant the family had been. This was unusual since they had become somewhat distant due to their strained relationship. A couple of weeks later, Katrina relocated her business to a different beauty shop. Now, here's where the surprising part comes in. Katrina mentioned that she was recently out with some women at a bar. They had a few drinks and started gossiping. Someone suggested they have a discussion about their best and biggest experiences. In this conversation, each woman reveals the name of the man who was their best lover and the name of the man who was their most well-endowed lover. I didn't realize this was a topic women talked about, but I asked Katrina why she was sharing this with me when Benita wasn't present. She explained that one of Benita's cousins, whom we'll call Patricia, was at the gathering, and Patricia is still good friends with Katrina. During this conversation, as they went around the table and shared their answers, Patricia disclosed, "My cousin Benita outdid all of us in the biggest category." According to Patricia, Benita once mentioned being with a Hulk-like guy from Greece years ago, who had a double-digit measurement when hardwood. She continued, saying that Benita had mentioned, "He was not very smart but had the physique of a statue." According to Katrina, Benita thought this man was so unique that she invited him for a second night of intimacy and then disappeared from his life. She explained that he was a financially struggling busboy from another country, so ditching him had been quite effortless. This revelation left me feeling hurt and concerned, but I still didn't understand why Katrina was sharing something that had happened years ago involving Benita. Katrina then pointed out, "Luis, don't you see? This didn't occur years ago. It happened while you were in Hermosillo, and that man was Nick." She described Nick as a tall and Herculean figure, but not particularly intellectual. Katrina also mentioned that the others in the group, including Patricia, were unaware of the dinner that she and Benita had with the brothers. So she pretended to laugh it off, but felt she had to inform me about this, believing that I should be aware. She went on to say that Patricia had told the group that Benita had once mentioned that no one could compare to me, Luis, and that I was her best lover and her eternal love. At this point, I had heard enough and thanked Katrina for sharing the information. However, in the back of my mind, I wondered if she might be lying out of jealousy, attempting to sabotage our relationship. That evening, when I went over to Benita's place, we spent a pleasant evening together as usual. I didn't bring up anything with Benita because I didn't want to create turmoil if Katrina's story turned out to be a fabrication. The next morning, my curiosity got the better of me, so I tried calling the phone number of the brother, but the call failed. It seemed that the number was either disconnected, or I had dialed it incorrectly, or there was some other issue. As the morning progressed, my mind was filled with the information I received last night. So, around 1:30, I decided to visit the Greek restaurant, thinking I might have a chance to speak with the uncle and clarify my situation. I went to the restaurant, enjoyed a delicious meal, and as I was finishing up, the uncle approached my table to express his gratitude for choosing their establishment. He then noticed my landscaping truck and asked if I was in the landscaping business. I confirmed that I was, and he expressed interest in getting an estimate for landscaping work on their building. After completing my meal, we conducted a walkthrough of the property. Once we finished, I told him I would return with a detailed estimate. Then, I asked if I could set aside my business inquiries for a moment and pose a personal question. He agreed, so I proceeded to ask if he was the uncle of Chris and Nick. He confirmed this and mentioned that they had returned to Greece. I inquired whether he had met them during their stay, and I explained that a friend of mine had, and I wanted to reach out to Nick to ask him something. He inquired about the nature of the question, as he could pass the message along to Nick. I explained that I wanted to inquire if Nick knew a woman named Benita. The uncle's face brightened, and he said, "Yes, he knows Benita, and he had a fondness for her. She dined here one evening with a friend, and Nick went on a couple of dates with her the weekend before he departed. Ouch." He mentioned that Nick believed they were in love, but Benita had been ignoring his calls and messages ever since he returned to Greece. Naturally, I felt quite sad upon hearing this news. The uncle then proposed that we call Nick, and he led me back to his office, dialing Nick's number on speakerphone before I could explain further. Nick answered promptly and exchanged some words in Greek with his uncle, engaging in a conversation that I couldn't comprehend. Afterward, the uncle turned to me and asked, "How do you know Benita, and could you convey a message to her for Nick?" I responded by expressing my reluctance to spring this information on them. I assured them that I wasn't angry, but rather saddened by the situation. I then disclosed that Benita is my girlfriend. The uncle appeared genuinely surprised, his face reflecting shock at this revelation. He proceeded to converse with Nick in Greek for several minutes before slowly ending the call. He conveyed his apologies and stated that Nick was also sorry for this situation. Nick had no knowledge of my existence, and he expressed regret over that fact. The uncle shared that Nick was upset that Benita hadn't disclosed her relationship with me. He mentioned that Nick was heartbroken because he had hoped to develop a romantic relationship with her. I inquired whether Nick had mentioned any intimate involvement between them, and the uncle hesitated briefly before saying, "I'd rather not say," and added, "I extend my heartfelt apologies to you on behalf of Nick, myself, and our entire family." That evening, I had a conversation with Benita. I asked her if she had been to the Greek restaurant, mentioning that I had been there myself. She seemed surprised and inquired if the food was good. I confirmed it was and proceeded to mention that I had run into Katrina, who mentioned that both Benita and she had dined there for a complimentary meal. Benita recalled the occasion, explaining that they had received the free meal as a gesture of appreciation for their excellent work in washing and cutting the hair of the owner's relatives. Perhaps I could have handled the situation with more tact, but I decided to be straightforward and asked her about her relationship with Nick. Benita seemed puzzled and responded with who? I clarified, saying, "Nick, you know who I mean. Did something happen between you two that weekend?" She appeared bewildered and agitated, responding with, "What are you talking about?" I pressed on, saying, "I spoke to Nick on the phone today, and he admitted to everything that happened that weekend. In response, Benita denied any wrongdoing, stating that they hadn't done anything beyond her giving him a ride around town after dinner, which raised my eyebrows. I questioned her about why she hadn't mentioned this earlier and expressed my doubts. I also mentioned the claim that she had referred to Nick as her most well-endowed lover and me as her best lover. She vehemently denied making such statements, accusing someone of spreading falsehoods out of jealousy to break us apart. I then broached the topic of a DNA test, to which Benita quickly agreed. I suggested making the appointment the following day, but she insisted on waiting until after the baby's birth. I agreed not to push the issue further, but I explained that our relationship would be strained until then, and we wouldn't be moving in together. This made her cry, and I assured her that I would support her throughout her pregnancy, regardless of the circumstances. She tearfully pleaded, "Why won't you believe me? I love you more than anything and would never do anything to hurt you, I swear." The following day, Benita made a Facebook post, claiming that troublemakers were attempting to sabotage our relationship, and that I had developed cold feet about becoming a father. She requested prayers and received over 1,700 likes and numerous prayer and hug emojis as responses. Upon discovering this post, I asked her to take it down, as it contained inaccurate information, and she promptly deleted it. Later that night, Katrina posted on Facebook, asserting that nobody was causing problems for Benita. Rather, Benita was concealing the truth about our relationship and the baby. This post garnered reactions such as shock and anger emojis from those who read it. Upon learning of this post, I requested Katrina to remove it, and she complied. However, by that time, word had already spread throughout the community, suggesting that Benita had been unfaithful, and there were doubts about whether the baby was mine. From that moment until the baby's birth, our relationship remained strained and distant. Nonetheless, I continued to provide support, and even purchased over $1,400 worth of baby items like bassinets, strollers, and tubs. When the baby was born, I was present at the hospital and had the opportunity to hold the beautiful child, which brought tears to my eyes. As I was passing by the hospital station on my way out, the head nurse informed me that she had the birth certificate ready for me to sign as the father. I discreetly informed her that I would sign it after we had completed the DNA testing. She expressed surprise and offered profuse apologies, explaining that Benita had instructed her to enter my name on the certificate above the father's signature. She assured me that she would promptly rectify the document. Benita declined to undergo DNA testing at the hospital and expressed, "Don't you love your baby? He's yours. You can see it in his facial features. He adores you, and I love you more than anything. Please don't make me go through with the test. It would break our trust and ruin our family." I explained to Benita that I needed certainty, but she remained steadfast in her refusal. That night, she posted a photo on Facebook featuring her and the baby, with the baby wearing a shirt that read, "Daddy's boy." The caption stated that Daddy loved the baby but had reservations about parenthood. She asked for prayers. The post quickly received over 500 responses before I noticed it, and I called her to request its removal, which she did. My boss recommended taking legal action to compel a paternity test, and he connected me with an attorney who initiated the process. I didn't want it to come to this, but Benita left me with no other option. During the court proceedings, the judge inquired about our reasons, and my attorney explained that I sought custodial rights to the child if it was indeed mine. Benita appeared in court without legal representation and offered to voluntarily grant me 50-50 custodial rights without the need for a test, as expected. The judge asked my attorney if there were doubts about paternity, to which my attorney replied, "Yes, Your Honor, and we can provide witnesses to testify to that fact." The judge then issued an order for a paternity test and expressed hope that everything would work out for both of us because the baby deserved a loving mother and father. In the interim, Benita gave the baby my first name and hyphenated my middle name with my last name, retaining her maiden name as the baby's last name. So now, the baby bears my full name. This might prove confusing for him. The scheduled date for the test came and went without Benita's participation, leading us to return to court. This time, the judge ordered her to undergo the test, or potentially face contempt of court. Finally, she agreed to take the test, and Update. I already had a deep sense of this in my heart. I thought that finally resolving all of this would bring me relief, but instead I'm overwhelmed by a profound dark depression like I've never experienced before. I've lost the love of my life and the child I wished were mine. Now, some individuals in our parish and community are suggesting that I should step up, marry her, and be a father to that little boy. I wish I could be a better man and do that, but I simply can't. Our priest had a private conversation with me and shared a Bible story about a man, possibly named Jacob or Joshua, who went off to battle and returned years later to find that his wife had given birth to another man's child because she believed he wouldn't come back. Instead of anger, he professed his love for his wife, took responsibility for the baby, and they lived a happy life together. He told me this story to illustrate that relationships in such situations can work, but he respected any decision I made. I told him that the man from the Bible was a good and brave soul, but my circumstances were different, and I could never trust Benita again after what had transpired. Our priest understood my perspective. Despite the truth being revealed, Benita continues to make posts on Facebook featuring herself and the baby, mentioning me. In her latest post, the baby is dressed in a one-piece outfit with Junior on it, implying that he is my namesake. However, since the truth emerged that I am not the father, only a few people, mostly her family and closest friends, respond to these posts. I believe that, like me, people are concerned about her mental well-being. I've had another conversation with Nick through his uncle, informing him about the paternity test and the likelihood that he is the father. Nick mentioned he attempted to contact Benita, but she has now blocked him. He plans to return next month for a 3-week visit and hopes to meet with her. Nick wants to be a responsible father to the child and hopes to relocate to the USA. I advised him to first proceed with a DNA test before making any further plans. He mentioned he has consulted with a Greek attorney who indicated limited options, as Benita is an American citizen. Nick intends to speak with an attorney when he arrives here. I genuinely hope Benita comes to her senses and gives Nick the opportunity to be a loving father and assists him in obtaining citizenship. He appears to be a good person with a supportive family. I wish only the best for Benita, her son, and Nick. To provide a positive start for baby Luis, I invested $1,000 in BTC through PIPL and deposited another $1,000 into a savings account via PIPL as a gift to mark his birth. I understand it may not have been the wisest choice, but it brought me a sense of contentment given my circumstances. Lastly, I treated Katrina to lunch and expressed my gratitude for revealing Benita's affair. While I may not always approve of Katrina's actions, I will forever appreciate her role in my life. That's all I have to share, and I appreciate anyone who took the time to read my entire story. May God's blessings be with everyone.